Yesterday we were working with this sculpture and we did a little bit of fixing details on the surface, and then I also poured concrete into the mold that I make this one with, and that's this one right here. I put plastic over the concrete just to keep it moist overnight, and that helps it just ensures that it's going to cure without drying out, because concrete doesn't get hard by drying out. It gets hard through a chemical process that requires a little bit of water vapor. So keeping it wet will make sure that in the crucial first 24 hours it's got enough moisture, not soaking wet, but enough moisture just to make sure it cures properly. That can make a difference 100 years from now, whether it's cracking up or not. So this is the shell, the mother mold, and this is my silicone rubber mold for this sculpture. Let's pop it out and see how it looks. You might remember I put the concrete in and did a lot of shaking and like patting to vibrate it to get the bubbles out. I also pressed the fluid concrete into the details of the mold to make sure that little bubbles didn't form, like you can see. You might be able to see that right here. All these little tiny pinholes. Those are from bubbles that form in the concrete. I try to minimize those. Pretty good. That's a good cast. See these little holes, little fixable things. Check out the difference in color of these sculptures. These two are lighter, and these two are a little bit darker, and I think less. They have a little less blue in their color, and that's because of this. I'll tell you. For the lighter ones, I use this rapid set. They call it all-purpose construction material, and sometimes they call it multi-purpose repair. That's the lighter color ones, and the darker color ones use this Quikrete. I use precision grout. It's pretty similar, but it has a lot more what's called superplasticity. Hours and hours. It takes sit there for a half an hour just to let it gel a little bit so you can manipulate it, and it's only good for the type of mold where you can just dump cement in the mold and then forget about it till the next day. But if you have to manipulate it, make an indentation, or sculpt something hollow, it's just a very time-consuming concrete. So I prefer the Rapid Set brand. All right, so let's just keep taking sculptures out of molds. So this is rapid set. This is the one. This one is the one that I poured yesterday in the last video. Then let's just take a look at some others. This one I poured a couple days ago. Cast. Very few flaws on that one. Really flawless. This is such a simple mold that it's easy to cast the concrete and get a lot of good flow, and when you shake it, really, you can access all the little crevices where bubbles form, unlike this complex, detailed mold. Pretty good. All right, guys. Set these aside for a minute. What I do? Okay, all four of these sculptures are really simple because they have flat backs, and they're, like I said, about the largest sculpture that I would like to cast solid, because any bigger than this, and if you make them solid, they get just too clunky and too heavy. So I'll show you one. I'm going to take one out of a mold right now that's hollow, because otherwise it would be too heavy. That's this one. Yeah. This mold is for this little sculpture here. So I cast them in here. You can't see that it's hollow because I made the bottom flat, but it's fairly light. Okay, to take the sculpture out of this mold, it's a little more involved. First, let me clean off the bottom a little bit. Okay. This is just Crisco to grease it and make it slide. I'm going to turn it inside out like a sock. So this is a one-piece mold, and to take it off, I just turn it inside out, so it has to slide over its own surface, and this just makes it possible. Without Crisco, it just wouldn't work at all. touch that stuff if I can avoid it. See, I'm just peeling it off. That's the sculpture. Okay, good. I've probably cast about 50 or 60 of these using this mold, and over time this used to actually be connected here like that. Over time it's torn, making a little bit of a seam, and that's what this, I guess you'd call it a seam, is caused by. And I just knock it out with whatever tool I've got on hand. And I'll use a rasp for that later. Well, here's the inside out sculpture. Looks kind of like that. Kind of cute. So I'm going to clean this off, put a little bit of grease on it, because I'm going to cast another one just now. Just not too much. Turn it right side out again. There, now it's ready. Now we don't need the grease on the outside anymore, so just put some water and a gas station rag. Just wipe it off. So, there he is. Now, every time I cast one of these, I like to just find out exactly how good or how bad things went with this little seam right here. So I'm going to knock it off and see what happens. This is hollow. Let me find a hollow one to show you. This is what it looks like inside. Just kind of messy, but good consistent thickness with enough weight at the bottom so the center of gravity is not too high. The trouble is I get all kinds of problems with hollows and bubbles forming in the hands right here when I cast it. So I want to find out how serious a problem, or just how much work is going to be involved in patching up this one, if any, later on. So I'll just knock this out here. Looks like no problem. I was really careful when I cast this one to let the first layer of concrete gel up pretty firmly before I put on the structural layer that really holds it together. I'm going to do a lot more grinding and smoothing on this later, on my what I call my grinding day, but just for now I just want to uncover this area and see if there are any holes that I'm going to have to fill. Nope, looks good. Okay, so that one is out. So I could blow away all the dust. Because you don't want to breathe silica dust. It's not good for you. Now let's cast some. I'm going to take these and put them away. Okay, to cast this one, I first coat the inside of the mold with a very light, non-structural coating of relatively fluid concrete, and just make sure it has good coverage and that there are no bubbles and gaps and voids around the complex areas of the mold. Then I let it sit until it's like about the consistency of real firm jello or soft clay. And then I pour in some more cement, but it's still flexible, still slightly plastic. Then I pour in some more, enough clay that I can roll it around and create a surface, create a thickness of anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 inch, just so it'll have some strength but still be hollow and it won't be too heavy and clunky. let's just get started. I'm just going to eyeball it and judge how much concrete I'll probably need. Experience tells me I'll probably need about this much, which is, I think it's 16 ounces of, like a 16-ounce yogurt container, but that's by fluid ounce. By weight, that's about 50 ounces of concrete powder. So that's going to be the weight. If I use all this concrete, that's going to be the weight of the finished sculpture. About 50 ounces, which is slightly over 3 pounds. And that's light. That's light enough. It's not too heavy. Okay. So, turn on the fan. Get slightly less water than I need to start with. Getting rid of all the lumps. That's just the right amount of water. It's more fluid than I usually use at this stage because this mold has a lot of inaccessible spots, so I have to do a lot more shaking and shaking and vibrating to make sure it all gets into the details. Like, for example, these earlobes. The concrete doesn't want to go in there and it wants to form a bubble there. So I've got to do a lot of shaking to make sure that doesn't happen. See the bubbles coming up? I want to get rid of those. But you can't get rid of all of them, so you don't have to worry about that. But just as much as you reasonably can at this stage. All right. Now, before that starts to gel up, I'll create a spot that has a tiny bit more water than we done. That's just because this is a little more fluid right down here. And that's where I'm going to pour from first, just to get that initial layer. Not too much, not too little. I just poured in about as much as will fill about 2/3 of this head. And that's usually enough to cover about most of the inside of the sculpture in the deeper areas where I can't reach. So just do a lot of shaking. Make sure it gets into the details. Okay. Okay, right now I'm just looking for coverage of the surface of the inside, not a final structural layer, just coverage. As flawless as possible. I'll pat it in with a brush where I can reach it, just like that. A little more. Okay. Okay. I'm basically just covering the inside of the mold as best I can, mainly relying on my own experience of the idiosyncrasies of this mold, not using any standardized technique, but it's pretty helter-skelter at this point. But you know, at least I've got concrete. It's kind of ugly in there, but it's a fairly consistent layer of thin layer of concrete over the whole mold. It's not falling away. And now that slump is decreasing, I can set it down for a few minutes and just let it set. Okay, I'm going to set this down. As long as it's not slumping, as long as it's not going to flow out. Yeah. I'm just going to set it down for about 10 minutes. And then after the concrete layer in there is a bit like hard jello, maybe, then I'll put in I'll just throw in a softer layer and roll it around just to get a 1/4 inch to 1/3 of an inch, basically structural layer. And I'm going to do that with this. So this is just going to sit here for a while. I'll keep stirring it to keep it fluid. Okay. Now I can just sit for a while. I'm going to wash these brushes and be right back. Okay, I'll be back in a second with a list of sculptures that I have to cast today. I'm back, it's live. These are the sculptures I need to cast today. So I'm gonna get those molds while we're waiting for that to kind of solidify. Tomato. Sun face and sun face A. have to stir the concrete about every 5 minutes. And I'm going to adjust the consistency later. Okay, let's feel this. Yeah, it's not really strong, but I can tell it's gelled a little bit and it's ready for that next layer. So let's put that layer in there. So I'm going to take this concrete that I've been remixing and keeping it soft, and I'm going to adjust it to just the right consistency that it will flow over the whole inside of here, but it won't be so fluid that it doesn't stick. It won't all just slump out the mold when I set the mold up upright on a flat surface, such as this. Okay, so a little bit more water. See, it's not fluid enough to really flow through there, so a little more water. A little more. It should be like a runny milkshake, but not. It should be somewhere between clam chowder and a runny milkshake. Put it that way. That's looking good. Okay, that's just about right. Let's do it here so you can see. Way over here. Not quite enough to fill up the head, but it'll be just enough to flow down over the whole surface of the sculpture. Not shaking it too vigorously because I don't want that first layer to separate. I want to keep sticking to the sides of the mold. Take a damp brush and just kind of smooth it down without pressing through to the sides of the mold. That's about the right thickness. Now, it's not going to be too heavy, but it's going to have enough strength to be about as strong as ceramic. Now the next thing I got to do is, before I set it down onto this flat surface that'll form the bottom, I've got to scrupulously clean all of the bottom surface that's going to be in contact with the flat bat here, so that it doesn't distort the standing angle of the sculpture. The next thing is to get as much non-structural concrete down to the bottom as I can, so that it has a low center of gravity. You want a lot of concrete You want more concrete down at the base, as much as you can get down to the base without disrupting the rest of it, without disrupting the surface of the sculpture. So I'm just kind of pulling a little bit down without pulling so hard that I remove concrete from the side of the mold. Just put as much down at the bottom as I can. Now I'm going to take some more out of here and just, let me see, if this doesn't slump, I can put it upside down. Yeah, it's not slumping, it's staying. So I'm picking this up because I don't want to shake the table and re-liquefy the concrete and have it slump down into the top of the sculpture. So, got to isolate the table from all motion when you're just at this stage. Okay, so now I'm just going to take as much of this concrete as I can and just lay it around the bottom and then bang, put it on top of there. See, as soon as it's still and not moving, it won't slump, but as soon as you shake it or move it, it starts to slump and become fluid again. So just keep it still, keep it steady, and go like this. This is still, it's not slumping, it's adhering to the inside of the mold, but it's still fluid and plastic, so you can move it a little bit and it's not going to have any cracks. It's not going to mess it up. Oopsie. Okay, that's going to form the base. And give it a lower center of gravity. Okay, there we go. Now we clean the bottom scrupulously. Okay, now take this, make sure it has a clean contact all the way around. And go like this. And it's set up. Now, what I found is if you take a lightly weighted thing like the handle of this knife and just tap it like this, and from the bottom, if you don't hit it too hard, it'll just re-liquefy that last, like the bottom ½ inch of the concrete around here. It won't disturb the top, but it'll re-liquefy the concrete that's on the bottom of the sculpture and make it flow down to form a base. And you don't have to go so hard that you make a solid base like I had on the other sculpture. It can just be a sort of a flange or a bevel around the, maybe a 1/4 of an inch to 1/3 of an inch around the inside. And you can still have a little hole in the bottom of your sculpture with no problem. Just like to make sure. I just can't see what's going on down there, so I tend to do it too much and get a completely flat, sealed off bottom, but that's okay. Use more of a writing surface. All right, I'm going to set this aside and just not touch it for a day. Okay. I'm probably not supposed to be walking away and leaving my live broadcast going with just nothing happening but cement drying for people to watch. So I want to pick up my camera here and take it with me while I clean these brushes. We'll just see if that works. Okay. Like that. Better microphone. Okay. I'm just going to watch my monitor for a second and see where I should hold stuff. Oh, okay, so no lower than this. If I hold it lower than this, you can't see it. And if I hold it higher than about here, you can't. Okay, that's good. They're all the ones we just took out of molds today. This one was on the ground. All right. Next, let's do this tomato. Camera back. Okay, I think that's better. All right. I don't know if you can see it. This is going to be a tomato, like a smiling tomato. Can you tell? Anyway, there we go. So first we grease the mold. Couple of fingerprints in here. Cool. All right. This is going to be the hanging wire for this mold. Hold on a second. Gotta flip this. this tomato sculpture is going to be hollow. So I'm going to put the wire in it about right here. And it has to be just right for hanging the sculpture up. Just about right there. And this one too is pretty idiosyncratic. So I just kind of get experience with this particular mold, and after you cast in it about 10 times, I kind of get an idea of how to work with this particular mold and how much concrete to put in it. If I were to, I'm going to cast this hollow because it has too much volume. To cast it solid, it would be like 5 pounds or something, 6 pounds, which is just a little too heavy. So if I were casting it solid, it would be very simple. I would just calculate how much concrete it needs and mix it up and dump it in. But I'm going to manipulate the the concrete at different states of fluidity and stiffness, and press it into the sides of the mold, kind of like clay, like you would clay. And it'll be a much more elegant and lighter dish shape. So I'll start with a little bit less water than I will need. Fan. Little clouds of dust are drifting away. I turned the fan on too high when I was doing this one time, and it just blew the water away. So I sprayed it across the desk. The lumps. Now there's no more dust, so I'll turn off the fan. Experience tells me I added a tiny bit too much water, so I'm just going to add a little bit more concrete. I can always add more later if it's too soupy. Getting rid of bubbles. Good enough. Okay. Now just pour some in. Enough to cover up the facial features, and then enough that when you shake it, it'll cover the whole thing with about 1/8 of an inch. And I'll put the rest in later. That's about enough. Now I'm going to take just a damp chip brush, not too wet. Shake it off, and then tap it into the little creases. I'm scrubbing not to scrub the surface of the mold, but to shake the concrete that is in contact with the tips of the bristles, just to liquefy that little coating and get it to flow into the little crevices of the mold. So it looks like I'm scrubbing the inside of the mold, but I'm actually not. I'm just kind of trying to shake and liquefy the concrete around the details. Then when I go like this, I'm pressing it into areas where I know bubbles are going to try to form. Okay, then just kind of lay it onto the surface. So right now I'm not laying down a structural layer of concrete. That's not the purpose right now. The purpose is just to get a good painterly layer, thin as it may be, a consistent layer over the whole surface of the sculpture, of the whole surface of the inside of the mold. So basically getting rid of any bubbles that I can't see, and getting the concrete to flow. There went one right there. There's one. Getting the concrete to flow is about the best way to do that. Shake it too. See, that creates flow. Okay. Now I'm going to lay down, if this is about the right consistency, which it is, kind of like a jello, like a grainy jello. Now I'm going to lay down a structural layer. Aim for about 1/3 of an inch across the whole surface, but not too thick. Just go like that. You can actually get rid of some of this, just like that, if you have too much. Okay. I'm just trying to get a consistent thickness throughout, and I'm pinching it off at the corners because I'm going to go around later and lay down, I don't know if you'd call it a bevel or a flange, but a little flat spot around the edges here. I just touched the corner of the eye, so that'll be, you can see some rubber poking through the concrete right there. That would be a little hole. I just did it again at the mouth. I could feel it. That'll be a little hole in the sculpture, so at this point it's a good time to just cover it up. It wouldn't really cause any problems. It would just be like a pinhole in one of the most interior recesses of the sculpture, like the inside of this eye or the corner of the mouth. If it's tiny, it's no big deal. It actually might enhance the sculpture, but if it's too big, it could remove some detail from the surface. Okay. So the walls of this sculpture are now about a quarter to a third of an inch thick, and they taper off to 0 right around the edge. I could just leave that, but it would be kind of uncouth. So I'll show you what I'm going to do. My experience tells me this stem of the tomato tends to break off, so I like to leave a little here for structural strength right there. Okay. Kind of done with this now. There are 3 tasks left to do with this sculpture, and one is smooth off the inner surface, maybe once before I do the other things, and then again at the end. The other is to lay in the wire, and you have to kind of know through experience where the center of gravity of the finished sculpture is going to be. It's not always in the geographical center of the sculpture. With this one, it's just right about here. Lay in the wire and then think about where the tips of the wires are going to protrude from the little pyramids that I'm going to create around each end of the wire for strength. And then how the wire is going to bend when you hang it on a hook or something. You want to make sure it doesn't bump into the top of the sculpture, but that it's not too far down close to the center of gravity. So I'm putting it right here, but the bend point is not going to be right here. It's going to be a little bit higher, like 1/4 of an inch higher, because I'm going to stick, as this concrete firms up, I'm going to stick it right there. Right now I'm just laying down material. I'm not creating the final shape of these little reinforcement plinths, you might call them. But okay, now I'm going to look at it from the side and see if it bends from here, how will it function as a hanging wire. And that's good. It's protruding about 1/8 of an inch from the top edge of the mold. Not too far, but just enough to comfortably get a hook under it. And if it bends here, the top of the wire will not, or the hook itself will probably not bump into the top of the sculpture too much. And I can make these as high as I want to make that even less of a potential problem. But right now, this concrete is too sticky and wet to do any smoothing with, or to make this edge around here. So I'm not going to mess with it for another 5 or 10 minutes. Then it'll be kind of like clay. So like I said, 3 things to do. Smooth the inside, lay down the wire, create the bevel around the edge of the sculpture, just to give it a quality structure and just a quality look, and then final smoothing. So this is going to sit for about, I'm going to abandon you for about 2 minutes while I go clean out this thing. If I ever get any followers, I can ask them, what do you want me to do when I go walk away for 2 minutes to clean things off? Do you want me to take the camera with me or play a selection of fine elevator music? Let's see what kind of elevator music I can play. Ta-da.